This exercise that we're about to go over, I got from Bill Hart's book, Solo Jazz Guitar, and it is a great resource for theory and application, and a good set list if you need one. Now, one thing I want us to do is make sure we analyze the exercise afterwards, so we're not just learning a whole bunch of grips and thinking that we're better. So make sure you understand why we are doing this exercise. Now, the most obvious thing this exercise helps with is knowing a bunch of major chords with colors all over the fretboard. If you can get really fast at it, you can get really jumpy, okay? Which helps a lot with neo-soul gigs or jazz gigs, in my case, a lot of gospel gigs, because they made us play crazy chord voicings. Now, if you're having trouble with this, it's normal, okay? It took me a long time to get used to it. What I suggest is that you learn the first 3 chords, and just go between them, and you get used to moving them because they're the same similar structure. And then after you get used to those, then you get used to the next 3, and then build up. Now, let's analyze some of the other parts of this exercise. So the first thing we have to analyze is what is the highest note of the chord. It's because it's acting as our melody note. In this particular case, Bill is trying to play a Lydian scale on the highest note of each chord, so that way he can build chord melodies in a much easier fashion. And a lot of us aren't paying attention to that. If we're comping for somebody or playing chords for someone and we pick a melody note that actually clashes with their melody note, it's going to sound really bad. So we got to make sure, why is this the highest note in this chord? Is there a particular reason for it? Are we actually trying to make a chord melody? Are we trying to voice lead? Or are we trying to comp for our singer? The next part is structure. Now, in this particular case, the C6 at the beginning, the C6 is already here, C, E, and A, and then he puts the melody line on top with that C. Now, if he could have kept that there, that C6, and then put the D on top, right, and be a C6-9, and then kept it on top again, and had a C6 with the E on top. But the idea here is that we have many structures that he's showing us on the fretboard. The more structures we have, the more options we're going to have. So make sure, what kind of chord are we playing here and how is it being developed? Another factor is, what is the lowest note of the chord? It's acting as our foundation, that lowest note. Now, a lot of people will start to say, hey, you want to make sure your note doesn't clash with the bassist. All the bassists that I have talked to don't care what note you put on the bottom, because they're going to overpower you anyway. If your bassist tells you to back off, then back off. But all the ones that I've talked to only care about the piano player getting out of their way more than the guitar player getting out of their way. So why does it affect us? It tells us how to be thinking. So in this case, our C is the lowest note the entire time. So we can think of that particular note and the structure that goes above it. There's also this C that's over here. But is that the only note we can have on the bottom? Of course not. We can have the E or the G stability-wise on the bottom. So I want you to always think of that when you're starting to learn new grips or new chords. What is your melody line? What is your structure? And then what is acting as your bass? This last aspect has to deal with soloing. And a lot of us are soloing based off of the Waterboy Mama Say religion, which is, Mama say I could play this scale over this chord, and that means that's what I can do. But it's not working like that. So let's say we're playing a C chord, and then we use a C major pentatonic on top of it. Well, now you sound like a C6-9. And the reason why is the major pentatonic has the 1, 3, and 5, but it also has the 2 and 6. So everyone's ear is hearing this chord as the overall chord, which usually sounds perfectly fine. But let's say we start to try to sound like a Lydian scale, right? Well, this is what we're going to sound like. Is this the most appropriate time to be using that particular color? And a lot of times the answer is no, because we are not playing over a 4 chord, we're playing over a 5 chord or a 1 chord. So we have to make sure we understand how these colors sound, and this exercise helps with that. We now hear a bunch of different colors in different contexts, and we now have a better idea of how we're going to sound when we're soloing.